Testing, testing. Alrighty, alrighty, alrighty. How's it sound? How do I sound? I think I sound good. Alrighty, let's do this now, I guess. Let me turn off the... Hello, everybody. Got my PNG in the tuber spot. Alrighty. Failed to connect to the server. Bot sentry. We are analyzing your connection. As this is your first time playing, we are checking your connection. Alright. Server recommends using a custom resource pack. That's question mark? Hope this isn't anything crazy. Crazy? I was crazy once. I am playing Minecraft. That is what I am doing, Loki. I'm trying out this new server that I've just been sent. Welcome, Walldozer. Who is lagging? Alright, let's see. On your Minecraft account to Discord, type /link on the Discord server to use proximity voice chat. What? Do I need to go on the Discord is what I'm being told? I don't know where I'm supposed to put this. Question mark. /link. Valid command. Correct command syntax. /link. Windows 33. Where do I get the code? Level linking is enabled on the server. Please learn more about level linking on blah 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 blah. That's a whole lot of things I don't understand. Alright, let me just keep reading. /phone, /discord, 3 players online, global chat. /G. Alright, you have no new mail, you are now talking in general. How come? Flash rules, alright. I don't really understand what it's asking of me. Alright, relevant. I just want the relevant stuff, man. How do I link? If only Pepe was here. Unfortunate, I just don't understand what I'm doing. Oh, we'll deal with that when we deal with it. What is this? Cherry Blossom, ranks and perks. Where to get keys and crates? I do not care. Find rare and unique items through normal gameplay. Earn money by killing mobs and selling items to a sword shop. Bedrock players. I'm not a Bedrock player. Spend money to rank up. Small amount of locks. Keep your valuables safe. Set a home with slash set home. Alright, start with a wolf pet. The wall and rank up or follow the directions. Alright, buy and sell. Alright. Alright. That was weird. What is all this? All of ranks. Prestiges. Alright, alright. Well, I'm definitely confused. If nothing else. This beginning area looks way too good. I don't like it. Alright, let's just keep going. This way to the shrine. Alright. 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 This is too much for me, man. Too much. Too much. I don't like it. Too much for me. Hey, where art thou? I have no idea what I'm doing here. Are you there? Gone. Fiona. Oh god. That hurt. I'm me. What's the beacon doing over here? Oi, oi. What's the beacon doing up here? I get to it. I keep falling. Falling. Ooh, bamboo. God damn it. Found it. What is this? I just fell in a hole. God damn it. How do I get out of here? Hey, where art thou? I'm fucking stuck in a hole in it. Why'd they do this to me? I will never forgive them. I'm gonna go to spawn. Alright, I'm back at spawn, I guess. Kill! Alrighty, I have no idea where I am. Hamlet. pumpkins. I have actually no idea where I'm going. This is unfortunate. I'm actually so lost. Oh, I can't say I didn't try. Pepe isn't here, so I have no idea where I'm supposed to be. I guess we're just gonna... Alright, let's just disconnect for now and keep doing the thing that we were doing on the other... Damn it. Need to be on a different version of Minecraft. Well, ain't that something. Back to nature, huh? Sounds a little like Germany. Earth. It is our planet. Alright, I guess I'm gonna go regular Minecraft. Just regular old Minecraft. Regular is as regular be. Regular, in a very regular sense. Alright, there we go. Abracadabra. Perfect. Perfect size. Anyway, while we're doing our hole mining that we're continuing with, on something background. Anyway, we did the Cuphead stuff the other day, so now let me can either do more or Lighthouse. Go back to Mort, I guess.
First big theory I have out of the way, that being the timeline of the canon. This is going to get very confusing very quickly because of the nature of the Penguins of Madagascar TV series, the likes of which a timeline placement is dubiously considered amongst even the writers themselves. They claim that people shouldn't care about its placement unless they are top-tier animation geeks with way too much time on their hands. Well, I'm neither. I'm an incredibly dedicated, incredibly serious, fictional theoretician, and I'm paid to do this, brushing aside minor flashbacks like the intros to Madagascar 2 and the Penguins spin-off movie, or the short films which take place all over. The timeline essentially looks like this. The Penguins of Madagascar Nickelodeon show is an outlier. Typically, the rest of the timeline would go Madagascar 2nd, Madagascar 3rd, and then the Penguins movie.
What the hell's up with this microphone shit? Hey.
The question then becomes, does it take place or does it take place between the Madagascar films somehow? Should be. It's tricky because all could work. If option number 1 is the truth, then it means the penguins quit their spy jobs and the lemurs quit the circus, and in the far, far future they all exist back in the zoo. If it's somehow between films 2 and 3 or 1 and 2, then it would mean the penguins and lemurs shunned the zoo gang and temporarily returned without them. The final choice is that they left permanently and stranded them either on Madagascar or mainland Africa, depending on when is more likely. The creators seem mixed on which of these is the truth, but for now, we focus on the characters. These 3 options, however, will come in handy later. It's most likely after everything or a parallel reality, though. Now that we've theorized on the possible placements of the penguins spin-off, we move on to the questions surrounding Mort. It is overwhelming, I assure you. First of all, Mort, he's not a child. He may look like a child. He may act like a child. He may sound like a child, but he is at minimum 35 to 50 years old. This is no joke. All King Julian is weird. In fact,
funny.
that the crazy is just beginning. Mort is a Microcebus lihilihitsura on the outside, but the inside proves him to be far, far more sinister. He is a pot-bellied pig, but that's not all. He's also part bear, part starfish, and no joke, part spider. He also has trace elements in his genome of sand, cacti, copper, and sawdust. It doesn't end there. He has a disturbing marriage history.
All right.
He has not 1, not 2, but 11 ex-wives, and all of them are dead. He is also invulnerable and has superior strength due to his delusional and obsessed nature surrounding King Julian's feet. He's a yes man that eats glue, and he's such a quizzical little rat. Finally, it's revealed that whatever he is immortal, and has the terrifying ability to suck the souls out of similar species, absorbing them into his mind and creating a split personality. Again, a lot to work with. With that said, clearly this will take some time. I recently stretched 5 seconds
I'm actually out of iron.
into a 10-minute depth analysis. This time we had something solid. There is more Mort, there will be more content. This is going to be more of a documentary than a theory, be warned. There's more discussion and analysis here than hypothesis. I am aware that I will have to watch every single episode of Penguins of Madagascar and then every single episode of All Hail King Julian. I foresee that this endeavor could span at least a couple of years, which means I'd need to update you along the way. Thus, solving Mort will likely take a grand total of 15 videos, adding up to 4 hours, if I can condense it properly, of course. Based on my current upload schedule, every 3rd video I post until spring 2022 will be a Mort analysis. The question is, should I do this? I need an empty 230 square foot room to organize my thoughts because a single notepad clearly won't cut it, and I'll need to invest in 8 corkboards and around 250 meters of twine. The immediate true mystery is, what can I do with this now? From what I understand, there have been a couple of videos discussing Mort and a couple of Reddit posts. I refuse to watch or read them for fear of skewed conclusion, and I don't know how serious or non-serious those discussions are to begin with. With that said, I can organize a battle plan for this miraculous hit piece. This is part 1, which means part 2 and 3 will also share the theme of highlighting evidence, with mini theories along the way. I will spend the rest of this video looking at Mort's oddities within Madagascar.
Sigh.
Looking at Penguins finally topping off the first trilogy with video 3, his strangeness in the frequency. Clues and formulating more major theories from the smaller ones. I'll probably spend 1 video on his Julian obsession, 1 video on his wives, and 1 video on his soul-sucking immortal and impossible genome. Video 7, 8, and 9 I have more strict plan for. They are going to be composed of past theories I am integrating in. 10, 11, and 12 I am going to connect them. I'll spend 1 video connecting Mort's mysteries to Over the Hedge, 1 connecting them to my Dubois analysis, and 1 connecting them to a final mystery film, or straight up creating a grand unifying DreamWorks theory from what I found. Which leaves us with 13, 14, and 15. I'm still debating whether or not I'll actually need the extra hour or extra 3 videos, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. There's also the matter of how this will perform in the YouTube algorithm. Now that you're all prepared for what's to come, we begin with the evidence you'll all be familiar with. Mort, Madagascar films. In the first movie, we meet him. Mort is a small lemur obsessed with King Julian, and is sort of the opposite of King Julian's actual second-in-command, Maurice. Mort is used as a test to see how the New York animals will react to lemurs, and is generally hated by his peers. He plays a perfectly fine but intentionally annoying role in film 1. In the sequel, he clings to the plane and behaves oddly. He first parodies the Twilight Zone and then goes flying thousands of feet into the Mozambique Channel. He stubbornly strives and is chased by a shark all the way to Central Africa, where he ascends a volcano nearly falls in. The 3rd film follows him joining the gang in the circus, where he again plays a lesser role. He does end up shooting Dubois with a tranquilizer gun. He's dumb at times, rational at others, and sort of all over the map. This is what makes him questionable. Primarily, what the films are good for is proving one thing: Mort is not mortal. Our dear friend, the French Death, is indestructible. He looks malicious at first on the wing of the plane because he's probably one of his alternate personalities. More on that later. He rips apart and causes the engines to fail, crashing the plane soon after.
Yes.
And he presumably
I broke a lot faster than I thought it would.
Sails thousands of feet into the Indian Ocean and doesn't die. He is pursued by a juvenile great white shark and evades it, though it desperately chases him on land as well. Mort doesn't die, which is the first crucial chunk to the theory that from this point can only evolve. With that said, it can only get more insane from here, so should I? He's such an enigma that while writing this, I was convulsing like a deranged artichoke. Speaking of the Soviet Union, it won't be long before I integrate Nana into this dissertation. Again, it'll probably be in the latter half of this journey, but everyone make sure you're caught up with my other DreamWorks theories, just in case. For now, though, subscribe so I know to make more of this, and comment Mort's odd moments from the shows and give me a little head start. Uploads may be scarcer a tiny bit here. My confused immune system has been attacking me for 2.5 years now. It's gotten really agitated in the past month, and it's made me too anemic and unfocused to think to my fullest, but when I get my hemoglobin out of its 7 gram per deciliter hole, I assure you, I will start critically thinking a bit better. And we'll be able to fully expose Mort as the war criminal he is. This was an establishment video, laying it all out on the table, solving the timeline, and looking at his film appearances as it goes up from here. Until my next video in the coming weeks, I am the theorizer. Oh yes, I'm really doing this. Everyone viewing this, welcome to part 2. What you are watching right now is the second part to what could possibly end up being a 15-part series, and I will link part 1 in the little card above now. It's only 10 minutes long, and it's a decent establishment video that attempts to organize what is to come. It's a prologue, and it truly highlights some of the things that Mort has done. In the Madagascar franchise, that is. Some people thought I was making outlandish claims about him in that video and not backing it up. I want to again inform you, those were not my claims. Those were literally things Mort is in the spin-off show. He does have like 12 wives. He is a soul sucker. He is genetically anomalous. I also do have some more news, though. The mystery series I will be incorporating into this, alongside my Dubois and Over the Hedge theories, might be my 8-part series on the lore of Shrek. That means the timeline theory, 4 godmother theories, 2 donkey theories, and the recent Reggie video will all be a part of this huge DreamWorks dissertation. We'll see how big this video, part 2, ends up being as well, and then we'll regroup. Before we begin, I also have updated news on the Madagascar timeline. From what I understand, Penguins of Madagascar, the TV show, does come after everything in the timeline because at the end of their movie, they meet up with the circus gang again in a post-credits scene I had missed. We see Julian and friends in Madagascar crate during the Penguins TV intro sequence, but it's likely a scene of some sort after breaking up with Sonia. So with that said, incorporating the shorts and once again excluding the intro scenes of Madagascar 2 and Penguins, our official timeline stands as All Hail King Julian, The Christmas Caper, Madagascar the First, Merry Madagascar, Madagascar the Second, Madly Madagascar, Madagascar the Third, Penguins movie, and yes, finally the Penguins TV show. We've finally put a definitive and necessary close on the timeline. There seems to be an upcoming Hulu prequel show detailing the zoo gang as children, and that would be before everything, but it's irrelevant to Mort, and it's not even here yet. So now, people, do you know what time it is? I promised part 2 would be me detailing Mort's oddness in the Penguins TV show, but I just had to watch All Hail King Julian. I had to, and I watched all 6 seasons of it. It consumed the month of May. It's why I got no uploads out. So we'll do that first and highlight every bit of oddness in this video. Warning of a lifetime, I might need more than just one.
God damn it.
Hello.
I'm mining.
This show is stranger than all of my other theories combined. It's made by different people, but it's canon still, so this will get interesting. It's basically like these writers are literally tempting conspiracy theorists. They load in as many offhand weird comments as possible and literally bait with a silver platter granted to me. I swear to you. It's painfully self-aware. What they've done is crazy. Mort is like if my Patrick Star theories all came true. I'm not joking. He truly is a multi-dimensional identity absorber. This is quickly going to devolve into a rapid bullet point format insanity. Any qualms I had about him just being delusional this whole time were obliterated with this show from the first moments when he tempts Mefusa with a high-key, dance. What this episode does try to explain is the feat. Julian rushes in and kicks the predators away with his dance, and Mort develops an obsession with his savior, King Julian, and the weapon of his salvation is, feet. It might not be the true root of his obsession, though. We'll see later if it's a red herring or not. Here, Mort has suspicious intentions, and seems smart enough to evade death, and has love for Julian. We already know all of this. The show is full of that fast-paced, lazy joke slapstick, and yet it's also wildly inappropriate and amusing in totally random moments. This will also be a review of the show in some ways. In episode 2, he continues with the inappropriate references, and in episode 3, he authors a best-selling coloring book called 50 Shades of King Julian. When asked to keep a secret, he claims that he has voices that tell him to hide things until it's too late for people to stop him. In this episode, he also survives being eaten by a carnivorous flower and projectile vomiting way more than his body allows for. He is also blown up, crushed, carried away by a bird, and slammed into the ground from hundreds of feet. Again, the humor, it's so adult. There is no way kids wouldn't pick up on this. It's so constant. In the following episode, people literally get drunk from partying, and in episode 5, the Fusa engage in a proclaimed mating ritual to create a new species. It's absolutely crazy. There's this evil Phanalopa named Carl, who has an intimate relationship with his purring pet cockroach. The show is self-aware, and Mort is always this show's test subject. The characters seem to already know he's indestructible, and they send him into dangerous situations constantly. Mort thinks Julian has exploded near the end of episode 3, and proclaims that no matter how much Julian runs, he will put him back together, and they'll live with each other forever and ever. A whole new level of disturbed. Packed with lore as ever, the end of the episode seems to reveal that there are certain gods in the sky who respect the denizens of Madagascar. This is our first true taste of the supernatural in this show, and it might come in handy down the road. Still, we're only a few episodes in. This is going to drain me in the best way possible. But back to episode 4, Mort is behaving and speaking a little more intensely while doing a security check on someone. He wears a glove on his head, and it transforms him. From what I've read on the wiki, I'm fairly certain I know what this is, but I'll delve more into that later, because if I theorize now, it'll just be answered later and the time will be wasted. Basically, though, Mort spontaneously changes personality, accent, appearance, and still notices that the feet look different today. In the 5th episode, he claims the feet haunt his dreams with pleasure. Mort seems to be lucid no matter how
this is certainly recommended this again, actually. Of course I'd end up in one of these.
Let's go back to those sky gods the lemurs worship.
Yay, iron.
They play a boombox and clouds roll in, seemingly confirming the existence of those deities, but I have to theorize a little bit here, bear with me. Because one episode prior, King Julian's bodyguard, Clover, goes on vacation and she meets a very strange spiritual guru inner peace guy named Sage, who, when he heads off, whistles and a massive bird carries him away into the sky. Could this little bit of oddness be tied to the sky gods? We'll need to see if this sort of thing ever shows up again, because Sage's supernatural aura could tie to these sky gods, and Mort can tie to them, thereby possibly answering some things. Because Mort and these deities are the two main supernatural elements of this show, from what I've seen so far. You know, aside from this lizard oracle, this show is chaotic neutral. Julian tries to fix his boombox so as to reconnect with Kevin, the god of precipitation, with the help of a small tenrec named Timo, who claims Julian's family is inbred. Inappropriate kids show, but there's your single explanation for Julian's behavior. Inbreeding. Timo fixes the boombox with mechanical skills and becomes their scientist. He works out a crashed USSR space pod. While he fixes the boombox to reconnect with the sky gods, Mort tries to summon rain with a song of his own and flings sticks into the sky.
I'll just leave that there for now. I don't need that.
Stab him perfectly with maximum force. It's possible that he's an enemy of the sky gods and may not even know it. When they bring back the boombox to summon Kevin, Mort screams that the boombox is undead like a zombie and panics. You had experience with that too, Mort? In a previous episode, we saw Mort's X-ray, but here, a blow dryer seems to go through his mouth and out his butt real quick, so which is it? Normal anatomy or anomalous? When he invites the local oracle into his home, he has a very odd demeanor and offers her a lotion made of his own tears. In this episode, episode 7, everyone sort of talks to themselves and acts if they have voices and identities, but Mort, as usual, takes the cake when he gets in the bathtub with the oracle and claims they'll be sisters forever. there. They borderline portray him as Annie from Misery, as creepy, as maximally self-aware as possible. They play the creepiest music as Mort disappears and then reappears with a blonde wig on and treats her like they're sisters. Something's going on here. Something tells me this is a soul the wiki had referred to.
Alright, let's head back up real quick.
Next episode, Mort bullies Maurice and then joins a monarchy rebellion group who manipulates him into creating good art to convince others of rebelling. Based off of the things he's drawing, I'm quite sure he knows he's being manipulated. He flips back and forth, eats dog meat and vomits it up. He knocks a ton of cacti over on them. He knows he's irritating them. In episode 9, he's scared, then bold, then claims he saves cake for his cheat days, and then things finally hit their stride and unravel in the season 1 finale. We're going through this quick, and I'm taking notes real quick. First, Maurice claims that he's just a co-star, implying he knows he's on a TV show. Then, Mort hits back with the innuendo saying he'd love to eat the yummy King Julian. But the finale's true purpose is what shocks me most of all, and answers many of the oddities so far. You see, there's this cove of wonders near their kingdom, where tons of stuff washes ashore, and they find coffee. And Mort tries chewing the coffee because he's stupid, and he screams about how he has a drinking problem. The kingdom starts losing it, and then, literally right after this show jokes about conspiracies of super intelligent Miller of government corruption, the most actually unexpected left field answer to all of this madness emerges from the shadows. Mort walks in with a monocle on and a British accent, claiming coffee has had a drastic effect on him, making him extremely intelligent for as long as it's in the system. I believe Mort, being this small and having that much coffee, has had this crazy hypermetabolic effect that cranked him way past being hyper and basically acts as a drug unlocking his brain. I can't tell if this is just a more intelligent Mort or a new personality altogether, but smart Mort does claim he loves King Julian just as regular Mort does. It's soon revealed that the evil Carl guy set up the coffee to take over the kingdom with caffeine addiction. Smart Mort helps save the day, claiming normal Mort is barely competent. He convinces all of Carl's guards that they should be unsatisfied with their current healthcare plan and that he can help them form a union to negotiate a working wage and retirement plan. I am not joking. This is like the culmination of every whack theory I've ever posted on this channel, and I'm made for this. Carl's workers turn on him and Mort slowly degrades back and forth before becoming obsessed over the feet once again. The day is saved and season 1 finishes, but the show is not nearly over, and my theories are truly just now beginning. In season 2, Mort keeps being crazy and playing along with jokes, including when he spontaneously summons an organ out of thin air and says he won't explain how he did it. The second episode is one massive social commentary after another, and the third showcases Mort's creepiness when his voice deepens. It's so romantically disturbed. He brings out the blonde wig again and then tries to make a self-aware joke by saying, "Denial isn't just a river I heard about, apparently." He claims he's been in strange love before, or is this a separate wig persona? We meet Clover's sister, Crimson, and she almost gets married to Julian, who objects and claims he's having an affair by loving his kingdom more than her, causing her to dip out and team up with Julian's uncle, who is trying to reclaim the throne. More later on that. But the reason for Mort's wig here? He's the flower girl of the wedding. He behaves differently, I swear. It's not the Mort.
Alrighty.
By episode 4, things start to get weird again when King Julian is given a pineapple and tricked into believing it.
I don't know if I can watch all this Mort stuff. It's actually hurting my brain.
Like normal children. What? Mort gets jealous of the pineapple's closeness to Julian and dreams of mutilating it. His worries aren't baseless as Julian...
Okay, that's enough of that. Let's get to the lighthouse. This is what I was going to watch earlier, but we didn't.
Pale death, eternal dread, make the OC caves our bed. God, who is the surge's role, deign to save our suppliant soul. For 4 weeks.
In 1801, a lighthouse which had stood there since 1775 was home to a tragedy that would go on to reform lighthouse keeper policy, where one of the 2 wikis stationed there lost his life after suffering for weeks on end following injuries sustained from a freak accident. The 2 men were never known to get along, and out of fear that if he threw the corpse into the ocean, he would be accused of murdering the other, the surviving wiki decided to build a coffin and place it on a shelf on the outside of the keeper's hut. But the strong weather of the Welsh ocean side broke the makeshift coffin, causing the dead man's arm to dangle in front of the window in the keeper's hut, and when the winds would blow, it would appear to the isolated man that the arm was beckoning to him, and he had to man the station on his own while dealing with this haunting image until he was relieved by the next set of wikis, and by all accounts, the experience made him nearly unrecognizable to those who knew him. Following the incident, policy was changed to make it so that 3 wikis would be appointed at the same time instead of 2. Max Eggers had been working on an adaptation of an unfinished short story written by Edgar Allan Poe, which he'd begun near the end of his life. It was never finished, but it was about a sole lightkeeper and his dog, told through the perspective of entries in his keeper's log, and it seemed to hint of some ghostly secret in the walls of the tower itself and the eerie waves of the ocean outside, but Poe died before anything could be expanded on. Max was struggling to find a way to bring his screenplay to completion, and when he and his brother Robert were having dinner one night, he talked about the idea he'd been working with. Robert was in a discouraged spot with his prospects in the film industry at the time, having recently been rejected for funding on his first film, The Witch, and he was immediately drawn in by Max's idea of a ghost story in a lighthouse, and so the 2 began developing the story together, pulling from maritime folklore, Greek mythology, and the insanity of isolation. During his research, Robert read about the Smalls lighthouse tragedy and found a lot of potential for the exploration of identity when he found that both men were named Thomas. The brothers completed the screenplay after a hiatus while Robert was working on The Witch, and its massive success gave him a lot more betting chips when it came to what he would do next, making funding the lighthouse a much easier venture than his first feature.
Boredom makes men to villains, and the water goes quick, lad. Vanished.
The Lighthouse, released in 2019 and was Robert Eggers' second feature-length film, proving once again the value that his commitment to research, historical accuracy, and stunning artistry, both in his cinematographic collaboration with Jaron Blaschke, as well as the Shakespearean writing and dialogue, which results in an incredibly dreamy and immersive film. While The Witch was shot digitally for budgetary reasons, The Lighthouse had a budget that allowed Eggers to go about production in his preferred way by shooting on film. Cinematographer Jaron Blaschke had to fight a bit with the studio to let them shoot the film in black and white and in such an unorthodox aspect ratio, as there were concerns about this decision negatively impacting the commercial appeal, but they eventually allowed it to happen. While the film takes place off the coast of Maine, it was in Cape Forshue where the 70-foot lighthouse the film would take place in was built by the local Nova Scotian crew, which was a hell of a time getting through considering how brutal the weather there in the Maritimes could be, and that's especially so since they were constructing it in the winter and they're right on the water. In my humble opinion, this is one of the most eternally fascinating movies ever made. The slow descent into Lovecraftian horror and bewildering insanity, partnered with an incredibly distinct visual style and two of the greatest performances you'll ever see, is one of the most unique and compelling experiences out there. And despite having seen it numerous times since its release, I find myself completely recontextualizing the story with every little detail that I may have missed or failed to connect on a previous viewing. It's right up there with my favorite movies of all time, and while I love all of Eggers' work and my preference moment to moment is very mood dependent, The Lighthouse is the movie that I find the most fascinating, and it may be the shortest I think it's time for another viewing cycle that I'm on for any movie, like ever. So with that in mind, let's take a look at Robert Eggers' 2019 film, The Lighthouse. By the way, there are chapters in this video just because it's going to be a very long one, so if there's any particular portion you want to hear about, make sure to make use of those.
How long have we been on this rock? 5 weeks.
I do love this movie. It is very
Where are
good.
we? Help me to recollect.
This is a really difficult movie to talk about since it's so bizarre and so much of what happens is open to interpretation. So I figure before we get too much into the narrative side of things, I'm going to talk about this style and tone since that's such a huge focal point for Eggers. Hell, he even said that the first thing that comes to mind for him when a story is born is a tone or a setting, and then he builds a story out around that atmosphere. So it seems a rather fitting way to approach a discussion about his work. As with The Witch, Eggers and his cinematographer Darren Blasky shot in a taller aspect ratio than what most films would be. The initial plan was to film in the same 1:66:1 ratio that The Witch had been, but after Blasky slyly joked about them going for the 1:19:1 ratio that was common during the time when films were transitioning into using sound, and I have a very strong feeling that Blasky knew exactly what he was doing when he made that joke because they agreed that it would be the best fit for the movie's tone and setting. Taller aspect ratios can help to emphasize feelings of claustrophobia and also do a better job at capturing height, both of which are important for this film as the isolation of these two men is the focus of the story, and we also have this 70-foot lighthouse towering over them the whole time, and going with this nearly square aspect ratio really helps to make those two core elements feel as potent as they possibly can. Blasky and Eggers are both sticklers for authenticity, both in terms of the sets, costume design, and language, but also in terms of the equipment they use to shoot these stories. So The Lighthouse was shot using Eastman XX5222 black and white film stock, which was introduced back in 1959, and the idea was to try and reflect the visual style of orthochromatic film. While this film stock definitely gave the sort of look Blasky wanted, the downside of it is its light sensitivity, which is much lower than a lot of other film stocks, and meant that in order to properly light these scenes with the right contrast, the amount of on-set lighting that was required was so intense that people were wearing sunglasses on set, and during the scenes when Dafoe and Pattinson are sitting at a table, they often couldn't see each other because they were blinded by the 600-watt halogen light used for the lamp between them. Multiple old-fashioned lenses from the early 1900s and the 1930s were used, some of which were strange leftovers Panasonic dug up and thought Blasky might want, which sounds like the happiest day in the life of an antique film gear nerd like him. And they also used filters to remove the red wavelengths from reaching the camera lens, which darkens any reds that would otherwise pick up just fine, and having two pale white dudes on a seaside in Nova Scotia is going to make them have a hell of a lot of red on their faces, which is what gives them this weathered look. Another effect of these filters is that the blues get brightened, so even on days when the sky was blue and nice on set, it picks up completely blown out and white in the final product, making the sky itself feel so bleak, like dead beechwood washed up on the shoreside. That sort of color filtering was used in a really cool dynamic way at the end of the movie when Young finally reaches the light, where they had a cyan filter over the light to make the blood on his face look inky black, and then swapped it out for a red one to make the blood look like it's fading away while they turned the brightness on it all the way up. It's a psychotic moment that we'll talk about more later, but for now I just wanted to mention how great that effect is. We can talk all day about the technicalities behind how the film's look was achieved, but I'm going to try and avoid doing that so I don't make the most indulgent video I want to make. The result of all this thought put into the film's style is nothing less than stunning, both because of the overall look of the movie thanks to the gear and lighting effects that were used, but also because of the painting-like composition of the film's photography. I mentioned in my video about The Witch that the style of that film really reminded me of Andrew Wyeth's paintings, so imagine my excitement when Eggers name-dropped Wyeth as an inspiration for the visuals in The Lighthouse in the director's commentary. That inspiration from paintings isn't something that's simply a stylistic thing. The Sasha Schneider painting Hypnosis is very clearly recreated here, which is directly tied into one of the film's themes of repressed affection between men, since Schneider was a gay man and had to hide that considering he was born in 1870. There are countless images in this movie that look like old orthochromatic photos or charcoal drawings, like something you see hung up in an old fishing gear shop on the coast. I will fully admit that a huge reason I find the look and feel of this movie so compelling is because the landscape and architecture are very homey to me as someone who grew up in the Maritimes, so seeing seagulls fly around these old volcanic rocks and looking at the chipped white paint of these buildings is something that makes me feel warm and cozy. But hey, the whole movie feels very surreal, but the way that they went about capturing the scenes that lean even further into that dreamy and strange feeling is incredible, with moments like when Young is drawn into the ocean by the logs calling back to something from his backstory, having such an insanely potent sense of surreality, with the strong flickering moonlight on the inky black ocean waves and then the insanely unsettling first look at the siren lurking in the water. It's so eerie. My collar really does not want to stay down, does it? I've had to flip this back up about 10 times. There's something very specific about the feeling of being tucked away on a rock far off in the ocean in these old buildings with the rain coming down on an oppressively dark night, the wind blowing through the air and bringing about creaks in the building, that looming sense of something strange lurking in the ocean just outside, completely unknowable and silent but sure in its presence. It's absolutely gripping. The scenes where they share dinner together with the kerosene lantern between them casting these massive and harsh shadows through the room, the isolation and lack of score in these scenes makes their voices seem so much more booming and strange, and much like these men find the burning light at the top of the tower utterly enchanting, I feel the same about the atmosphere built up in the film. It's one of those movies where if I'm going to watch it, I always make sure that it's at night with the lights off with nothing around to distract me, and preferably on a stormy night. The use of visual storytelling is also incredibly well handled here, like for example when the axe in the table is stuck right above Old's head as a little bit of foreshadowing for what's going to happen the following morning. Another incredibly important element of the film's tone is the sound design, which does such a fantastic job of sucking you into the isolated discomfort that these two wikis exist within. The steady hum of seagulls and ocean waves crashing on the rocks, the creaking of the buildings, and of course, throughout the entire movie, there's the constant reminder of the light hanging up there at the top of the tower as the foghorn blares out across the sea. After a while, you almost stop noticing it, and it helps to guide you into a near trance-like state, once again bringing to mind Sasha Schneider's painting titled Hypnosis. With all of that being said, I find it fascinating that perhaps the most memorable moment of the sound design is when it all falls away for a moment. After Young's confession about what happened before he came here, the rain fades to silence, the foghorn ceases to blare for the first time in the movie, and it feels like a massive turning point thanks to the suffocating moment of silence as we get these ethereal shots of the walk to the light before we hear the disembodied voice of Old break the quiet.
Watch us fill your beats.
Mark Torvin returned after doing the score for The Witch, once again bringing along his trusty and oh so coveted by yours truly apprehension engine. I know you can buy them, they're crazy expensive, and I may try and just make one someday. The Witch featured a very string-heavy score which fit the tone and folklore of the film very well, and this time around there's much more of a focus on brass, heavy percussion, and the use of conch shells to evoke the ancient Greek mythology of the film's story. Corvin is clearly very good at understanding how to write a score that reflects not only the tone of the film, but the setting as well, with his soundtrack here nearly feeling like the swell of the great waves in the sea at night. Strings are still used, but with more of an emphasis on cellos for the low end and foreboding sound. It's not just weird experimental sounds, to be clear, as part of what they wound up wanting to do was to try and make the score reminiscent of old school composition to match the movie's overall style, but with a more dreamy and strange wrapping for the whole thing. Corvin's scores are absolutely fantastic, and I'm very glad that he returned to do the music for this movie, as what he delivered is probably the most complimentary thing we could have asked for, perfectly capturing the strange and dark ethereal tone of the movie with deep roots of deception, disorientation, and isolation. It's incredible stuff. One of the things I love so much about Eggers' films is how he goes about writing dialogue, with a lot of what we hear in The Witch being taken directly from period-relevant texts.
Must I hear the devil? Why does tell me thy mouth?
There is less of that one-to-one writing here, with the only thing close to that being the toast that Wake gives throughout the movie.
Should pale death with treble dread make the ocean caves our bed. God who hears the surgeon's roll deign to save the suppliant soul.
That was inspired by the poem Sailor's Hymn at Parting by Lydia Sigourney, very closely resembling the final few lines of her writing, but being altered to fit the film's story better. Aside from that, the film's dialogue is more so a product of the Eggers brothers getting quite comfortable with Shakespearean writing and knowing how to translate their stories into that sort of presentation. The most important source of research for the regional writing here was brought up by Eggers' wife, who discovered an author named Sarah Ornay Jewett. Jewett's focus on telling stories taking place in coastal Maine was a phenomenal resource for this film because of how she would interview locals in the region at the time and record directly what they said, which gave a lot of information to the Eggers about the specific dialect that would have been used during the period the story takes place in.
I'll find some turkey, you lad. Now's the time for dabbing chatter.
Using their knowledge of Shakespearean writing as well as the interviews from Jewett's research, the dialogue crafted for this film is absolutely nothing less than astounding poetry.
Alrighty.
Like Colonel Forsker.
I said what I said. I could watch Defoe and Pattinson sit at a table and converse in these characters forever. It's such evocative writing with very strong imagery. There are lines in this movie that I regularly quote. The insults are perfection as well, and I've incorporated a few of them into my lexicon.
Goddamn drunken, horse-shitting, short, shit liar.
There's a lot going on in The Lighthouse, as you can tell by the fact that I haven't even talked about the story yet, and a lot of what happens is very symbolic and weird and hard to wrap your head around, and I think that the discussions around the film's meaning and whether or not it has any merit have overshadowed what I think is one of its best qualities. The Lighthouse is fucking hilarious.
A rare, a bloody steak. If I had a steak, I would fuck it.
In the director's commentary that Eggers did, he talked about how if he was going to follow up The Witch, which was a very bleak and miserable movie, with another story about misery, he wanted to be able to laugh at it. So, fart jokes. That's almost verbatim, by the way. There are a lot of farts in this movie, and while I'm sure to some degree it's a way to show how old is asserting dominance over young, from the sounds of it, they're really just there to try and lighten things up a bit and add to the bizarre confusion of the movie's tone. This mixing of a very dark and serious mythological story about salvation and divine ascension with juvenile humor like that actually does help the overall story, since so much of it is meant to be disorienting and strange, so having those two tones present scene to scene makes it very hard to really know what you're meant to be feeling, but it doesn't feel dissonant or out of place at all. Part of why I love this movie so much is because of how much goddamn fun it is to watch these two characters interact.
Feel shame when you lie with a woman? I ain't ashamed of nothing.
I will never not be beaming like a child on Christmas morning while watching Old get upset about Young saying he doesn't like his cooking, and then in response, Old goes into the most dramatic monologue you'll ever see, cursing Young with the spirits of the sea and the Greek gods.
For any stuff for part of Winslow, even any scantling of your soul, is Winslow no more.
It's one of my favorite scenes in all of film, and it's wildly impressive that Defoe did this entire monologue in one long take without blinking a single time. They do cut away from it for a moment to show Young's reaction, but what we see is a full one-shot of Defoe doing the whole thing.
All right, have it your way. I like to cook it.
Randomly yelling, "Hark!" has become a staple of my household because of this scene. The dance scene is another one of my favorites, where the two get absolutely fucking hammered and begin singing songs together before Old starts a big exciting jig and tells Young to dance as well with an urgency that is just hilarious.
Dance, Winslow! Dance!
Young is, despite what it may seem, actually singing a real song here and saying words. Robert Pattinson just sang it in the most unhinged possible way, and it absolutely fills me with joy. Well, with all that being said, what the hell actually happens in this movie? It's important to establish when talking about the narrative here that this is not a movie that's meant to be entirely understood. Part of the film's purpose is to be weird and confusing and strange, placing you right in the shoes of someone losing their mind in isolation and becoming delusional. I've never felt much of an urge to try and fully understand everything that happens because not even the actors really knew, and Eggers wouldn't tell them. At one point, Pattinson asked Eggers whose perspective the movie was from, and I'm probably paraphrasing here, but his response was along the lines of, "Who do you think?" If the lead actors aren't even given stable ground to stand on, then I feel like it's safe to assume that this is meant to be a part of the movie. It's also worth noting that Eggers said this movie arguably doesn't even have a narrative, so that just goes further to show the point I'm trying to make. However, having seen the movie so many times, reading through the screenplay, researching some of the mythology that was referenced, and trying to interpret the absolutely incredible visual storytelling, I do have some thoughts, although they all still leave me with questions. It feels like Eggers was intentionally tempting the viewer to try and look deeper into the bizarre happenings in the movie by laying these seeds throughout that start to paint a picture, but then one detail will come up or you'll notice something be recontextualized earlier that doesn't fit in with what you thought was going on. Some viewers want a concrete and definitive answer to the thematic purpose of a film, and I have a feeling that if you feel this way, this movie might really frustrate you, because I don't think it's ultimately there beyond whatever connection they personally draw. There's this general underlying story that I feel pretty good about, but it's amazing to me how, depending on the angle that I look at the film from, almost every element can mean a different thing. What I'm going to try and do here is go through the different ideas I have about the narrative and see if there's a way that they can all coexist. The basis of the story is quite simple. We open on this amazing and foreboding shot of two wikis arriving to the lighthouse where they are to be stationed for the next 4 weeks. They don't know each other, but the older one has been working this lighthouse for a long time, and the younger one is fresh on the job. The screenplay only ever refers to them as old and young, outside of when they say each other's names in dialogue, and this approach to their names makes it very clear that we just have no idea what the hell is going on. One of the most important things that's established about Young almost right away is that he wants to try and gain access to things and be given privileges that he hasn't yet earned. The moment he walks inside, he tries to get into Old's locked desk, knowing that he's not meant to be snooping around there, and yet it takes him no time at all to try anyway, almost as if he feels like he's entitled to whatever is inside of it. That's important to set up right off the bat because throughout the movie, Young tries to get his way into the lighthouse itself, which Old is holding steadfast that it is his post and Young is a long ways away from being up there.
I'm the keeper of the station, man. Some other station you can tend to like.
And whether it be the forbidden nature of it, sheer curiosity, or something else entirely, Young is absolutely locked on wanting to get up into the light itself. There are these little details like him leaving his cigarettes below the ladder into the light, almost like he's trying to claim the space for his own in some strange way that not even he realizes since he forgets them and has to go back to retrieve them at night. So I suppose it's important to try and look into what compels him so strongly to the light. And this is one of the simpler things to answer because it fits whether you look at the film from a supernatural perspective or from the point of view that we're just watching a descent into madness. The key lies very simply in how Old's last second described it.
He believed that there was some enchantment in it. Salvation, said he.
The light sitting up there at the top of the tower represents just that. Salvation. Very early on, we get the shot of Young working down below, and the camera pans up from the dark, dirty, and overwhelmingly loud base of the tower and slowly crawls up the spiraling staircase, winding up eventually at the ethereal light on the top, representing the urge to climb from the depths of hell into the light of heaven. Throughout the film, Young is shown working his way up the tower in one way or another, but never in the ideal manner, like how he lugs this massive kerosene can up the stairs. He winds up having to haul it all the way back down when Old tells him that it's dangerous to have this large can up here, and he's also shown that there are smaller cans meant for this exact situation. This represents how instead of taking the slow, patient, and proper way up, he's trying to force his way through this ascent without the proper care given. Then we have the scene later on when they're whitewashing the tower, and Old is being very aggressive with the pulley, which eventually leads to it breaking and Young falls to the ground, once again being sent back down to the bottom from his attempt at ascent. It's worth noting here that they never even finished painting the tower, which makes it seem like Old just wanted to mess with him. It's made very clear as things go on and Young becomes more and more driven to get into the light that he feels very entitled to it, and there's a clear difference between how these two men...
Alright, let's actually start digging the hole. 45 minutes in and we're finally doing what's said in the title.
There's a reverence in the way Old sees the light, whereas there's an entitlement from Young who hasn't earned his way up yet, which, as was established earlier when he tried to break into Old's desk, is something that's not unique to this situation. It also ties directly into Young's backstory that gets revealed after a while, where he admits that he's been lying about why he's here and who he is. He first tells Old that his name is Ephraim Winslow, and that he worked for the Hudson Bay Company in Canada but got fed up with it.
Just like you said, I had enough trees, I guess.
It's true that he did work for the Hudson Bay, but the reason that he left is much darker than what we know at first. As it turns out, Ephraim Winslow was the name of Young's former, who was having a go at Young one day when he fell into the water, and Young did nothing to save him from drowning.
All I could think when he was done was, I could use me a smoke.
Now, he remains adamant that while he thought about swinging the axe down on his head in his anger, he never actually did that. However, I have a slight feeling that may not actually be the case. I think that most of this is the truth, but it's also hinted at that he did, in fact, axe Ephraim towards the end of the movie when he does the same to Old, and then all he seems to think is,
I could use me a smoke.
We're seeing this movie through a very unreliable and vague lens, so it's hard to know what's real and what's not, but I do find it interesting how comfortable he was with doing this and that he had the exact same reaction that he described last time. He's also shown to be quite a violent person as things progress, seeming more comfortable with the thought of violent acts than someone who never committed one before would likely be, like when he nearly stabs Old in the throat while he sleeps with a knife that he stole and tried to use to break into the light, which broke in the shape of a seagull's bill, by the way. It's pretty cool. He seems to be holding himself together fairly well at first, sticking to his sobriety after admitting that he had a problem with drinking before, but when he eventually gives in and begins drinking again, things go off the rails really quickly, and we see just how unhinged he truly is. Point is, after either killing or negligently allowing him to die, Young took Ephraim's identity and fled the company, finding himself taking up the job as a wiki after learning about the pay and the isolation.
Tends to like far offshore. The further away, the more he earns.
That's another example of how Young has a tendency to force his way into positions or places that he hasn't earned the right to be in yet, taking the identity of his former. All that being said, it's not as clear as Young is bad and Old is good, because Old is a very antagonistic and taunting man who takes pleasure in the displeasure of Young, not warning him before drinking water from the cistern that's full of shit, messing with him with the pulleys. This kind of thing happens all the time. He's very harsh on him with moments like when he tells him he hasn't cleaned the space despite Young's insistence that he has, which is another one of the best scenes in the movie.
In the fight is you have to pull up and apart every floorboard and cupboard of this here house and scour them down with your bare bleeding knuckles. You do it!
He's very critical of him, and as things descend further into madness, he seems to be taunting Young's shaky grasp on reality. But there's also a lot of moments where the two get along extremely well. It's impressive how well the movie handles this unhinged relationship between the two, where they'll be enjoying drinks and laughing one second, fighting like it's the end of the world the next, then sharing stories of their past while smoking and drinking, then slow dancing together, then beating the shit out of each other. They really go through all of it, and it's a hell of a lot of fun to watch. So here we have Old, a man who's been with this life for a long time and has respect and love for whatever magic is seemingly at the top, and then there's Young, a man who only just got here after killing someone and going on the run, who feels like he should be allowed access to that same magic. You could look at the movie as simply as that. There is something in the light that has kept Old here for a very long time, and he's earned his place at the top to enjoy whatever splendor he sees within it. Young comes here after doing something horrible, and because of his nature, he feels like he should be allowed up there. He sees his salvation and wants to force his way in, and in the process, he gives in to his old temptations of drinking and slowly loses his mind, becoming more and more unhinged and tormented by Old, who sees him for what he is, but also strangely relies on him for companionship, and by the end, Young kills Old and breaks his way into the light. The bizarre imagery can be a result of us seeing the movie through the lens of Young, who's clearly mentally unstable and can't be seen as reliable when it comes to having an accurate sense of reality. The isolation, alcohol, and consumption of turpentine could have broken whatever shaky grip he had left, and it could be as simple as that. Another way of looking at the movie could be through a sort of cyclical lens, where Old and Young are the same person. They do, after all, share a name, and there's an interesting detail detail that seems to fuzzy their characters a little bit during that scene where they're sharing stories together. Throughout the film, Young smokes rolled cigarettes and Old smokes from a pipe, but during this one scene, they swap, and they also happen to be wearing the same clothes here, which leans further into that idea of them being the same person. Could it be that Old is the version of Young who earned his salvation, and Young is the version of him that hasn't done so?
I didn't want that
and
to
is being
break,
tormented
though.
through
That's
his past by his
unfortunate.
older and
I'm
wiser
paying
self?
attention.
That may explain why Old is so terrified of Young leaving him, because even though he ascended past the transgressions of his younger self, he's still terrified of the idea of the man he used to be completely leaving him behind on his own. He could be taunting this younger version of himself because he hates the things he did and the temptations he gave into. Maybe Old is the ghost of who Young will be when he eventually manages to transcend, and Young is forced to relive this experience over and over again until he finally earns it. But what the hell's with the tentacles then? What about the siren and the scrimshaw? Well, in the screenplay book, there's a section at the back that's full of definitions for different words from the era that we may not know, or for words that relate to the maintenance of the lighthouse that the layman would be unfamiliar with. But one thing that caught my eye is the definitions given for Proteus and Prometheus, two gods from Greek mythology. They are both mentioned in the film, and while I'm very much not well-versed in Greek mythology, the connections that these two gods have to Young and Old really help in understanding the movie's story at a deeper level with something that seems much more concrete despite how symbolic it all is. Proteus is one of Poseidon's children and was said to be the guardian of the first lighthouse, which was called the Lighthouse at Alexandria. He was referred to as the Old Man of the Sea and was known to be a shapeshifter, which lines up pretty much perfectly with Old himself when you take into account the bizarre things that we see occur with him at certain points of the film. Of course, being the keeper of the light is a clear connection as well, as is the use of the simple name Old. So while Old is at the very least meant to reflect Proteus, Young seems to have a lot in common with Prometheus, a titan of Greek mythology who was banished to an eternity of being bound to a rock while an eagle pecked out his liver, which grows back each day only for the torment to resume. And why was he given such a harsh sentence? Because he defied the gods and captured fire, and according to the definition in the book, he represents humans overreaching. The connection here is undeniable, with the final scene of the film depicting Young on a rock with a seagull pecking out his liver in place of an eagle. I was curious as to why the screenplay specified that his liver was being pecked at, and this definition cleared that right up for me. Early on in the film, Old mentions that his former thought that St. Elmo himself had cast his fire into the light, further solidifying that connection that Young has with Prometheus, where he stole the fire he was not meant to touch and was then punished for it eternally. St. Elmo, also known as Erasmus of Formia, is the patron saint of sailors, and St. Elmo's fire is a bizarre light phenomenon which occurs during storms that was the source of many different stories in nautical folklore. However, I definitely wouldn't go so far as to say that this is literally a story about Proteus and Prometheus, since there are elements that separate the events of the film from those stories, like how the bird at the end is swapped from an eagle to a seagull, which means we also have to take into account the connections to nautical and maritime folklore. We even see the blending of these two mythologies towards the end of the movie when Old is being buried. It's one of the most poetic scenes of the film, with Old talking about Protean forms and Promethean plunder, but also referring to Fiddler's Green, a sort of heavenly afterlife for sailors and maritime folklore. The thing is, that angle of Greek mythology doesn't at all negate the previous theories, since at the core of these stories, the natures of the characters themselves remain very similar. Prometheus's hubris led him to try and capture something that wasn't his, as did Young's, and Proteus' stance as this old god of the sea can coexist with Old being the keeper of the light or some ghost who calls his rock home. The other two pieces of the puzzle are the siren and the one-eyed seagull, who plays a very important part in the events of the film. The siren, at least in my eyes, represents temptation, which is something that Young is forced to confront constantly in the film, be it the draw he has to alcohol, sexuality, or the light. The image of the siren on the rock was the first thing to come to Robert's mind when his brother Max told him about the movie he was making, and so it's certainly a core part of what he tried to bring to the script. In folklore, sirens lull people into the oceans with their eerie songs and then pull them into the depths once they have them under their spell. To my chagrin, there is no eerie siren song floating across the ocean waves in this movie, but instead we have the siren tempting Young sexually. When he first arrives, he finds a mermaid scrimshaw tucked away in the mattress and becomes obsessed with it as time goes on. The scrimshaw looks to have belonged to the last second, implying a similar tendency towards depraved sexual behavior. He begins to see this siren appearing first after he hallucinates the death of his former back in Canada, which almost makes it feel like the sight and horrifying shriek that come from the creature are a reminder to him of the dark secret that he's keeping locked away in the deep ocean of his mind. It's also not out of the question that Old and the siren are connected, considering the parallels between him and Proteus and the fact that Proteus can shapeshift in mythology. So we have this idol of temptation that Young is both drawn to and deeply terrified of, like any sane man would be at the thought of falling back into the vices that led him down a dark road. The one-eyed seagull is fascinating as well and is directly tied to Old's previous second. When Young finds the head of the deceased man,
Where am I hearing zombie noises
early on
from?
in the movie, Old had warned Young about how the souls of dead sailors found their homes in the gulls.
Why's it bad luck till I go?
In them's the souls of sailors that met their maker.
The one-eyed bird taunts and torments Young throughout the first act of the film, which may be somewhat of a reference to how the hand of the Wickie that died in the Smalls Lighthouse tragedy would tap against the window of the surviving man, driving him slowly mad. Young kills the gull in a moment of sheer rage, which beckons in the massive storm that makes things so much worse as Young has now committed an atrocious sin. That section in and of itself seems fairly simple, where we have this piece of maritime folklore about seagulls harboring the souls of dead sailors, and the act of violently destroying that vessel causes this storm to explode. But then we see the one-eyed seagull again at the end of the movie, pecking away at Young's liver, which brings up a bunch of new questions. Was the gull something more than what it seemed to be at first, and was it in fact part of the test that Young was being put up to as a part of his salvation to see if he could resist against his tendencies towards violence, and then when he wasn't, the gull was ultimately part of his punishment as well? Could it be that a lot of the Greek mythology that we see is nothing more than hallucinations on the part of Young, who perhaps knew some of these stories, and then as his grip on reality loosened during the storm, his mind began to fill in blanks to try and find something to grasp onto, and because he hated that gull so much, he saw it as the perpetrator of his eternal torment? Is the whole story happening inside of his head as he sits there on the rock with his liver being pecked out for all eternity, and the gull manifested in that hallucination as his tormentor, as if it was reality, if you could call it that? Another idea relating to that gull is that we know that Old's last second developed a similar obsession with the light to the one that Young does, and while Young won his fight against Old, it may have gone down differently last time. That would also explain why Old has such a visceral reaction to Young getting aggressive with the one-eyed seagull, because not only is he trying to hammer in the idea of the spirits of sailors who died at the sea coming back as seagulls, and killing one would be a disrespect to them, there's also this strange shame that he shows during the scene.
I mean, no mind, lad. None.
He may think that the seagull is the resurrection of his last second and feels ashamed of what he did and doesn't want his spirit to be further harmed.
Escape be. Bad luck to kill a seabird.
There are more connections here to the Smalls Lighthouse tragedy, where if this theory of Old having actually killed his second after he too became obsessed with the light is true, there's a parallel there of how the surviving man put the deceased into a coffin to try and avoid being charged for murder. Well, Old may have thrown the head into the water in the hope that it would be washed away into the sea. Maybe the head is all that's left of what has already been taken. Maybe all of these seagulls here are previous seconds that have been all tested by Old. Who the hell knows? Going back to that painting that's recreated, it was done by a gay man who, because of the time he was alive for, was often forced to hide that. There's no question that Young and Old have affection for one another. They dance together and hold on to each other like they're all they have, and at one point it looks like they come damn close to kissing before they begin beating the shit out of each other. Men tend to have a harder time being affectionate with each other, even if the intentions are completely platonic, which I don't think you can easily say they are here. And through moments like that, you can see a reflection of where they get so close to it, but instead they both explode into violence. They sometimes argue like an old married couple, which is honestly where a lot of fun comes from.
How can I possibly like the horse shit? You fix that for supper. You're drunk. You must be saying that.
So many theories. This movie is so full of symbolism that
Breaking
pulls you into a direction that seems to make sense for the first while, and then something else will come up that forces you to completely reconsider everything you thought you understood about the underlying narrative. As I said at the beginning of this video, I think
Give me
this
the wheat,
completely
honey,
and
go to
just
sleep.
enough of multiple different ideas, but not quite enough for any one of them to be definitive, which opens up this whole world of discussion and theorization that I don't think can ever be concluded. Out of the different angles I talked about here, I'm not even sure which one I like the most, let alone which one I think has the most to it. On my most recent viewing, however, after going through all these different ideas and trying to see what dots I could connect, I realized that from a certain perspective, a lot of these theories are not mutually exclusive. So what I'm going to try and do is give an overall explanation using bits and pieces of everything I've talked about here to try my very best to incorporate the ideas that I find the most interesting. In terms of the histories of these two men, Old tells the most truth about his life. However, by the time that Young arrives at the rock, Old is a ghost who stayed on the lighthouse because of how much he loved it, and because he's so drawn to the light. Young did kill his former at the Hudson Bay Company with the axe, but he's not someone who can take responsibility for the things he does wrong, and perhaps even convince himself that he didn't do it. You can see that attempt to shove back his true identity, not just through him lying about his name, but also in his accent, which changes him to drunk, angry, or otherwise unhinged, making it seem like the way he speaks at the beginning of the movie is a facade he's built up, and we see that break down as time goes on.
I'm close to it. I'm taking a sign to it, so it's moving along. You're doing the president, getting my father. Now stick you back to my list.
Given the mystical significance of the lighthouse itself, his time as a wiki is essentially used as a test of his character to see if he's worthy of salvation following what he did. The ghost of Old is a part of that trial. The parallels between Young and Old are there to make Young face the person he really is instead of the identity he's attempting to take on, which is why Old takes the name Thomas. Old does enjoy the company of Young, despite being a part of this trial, because he likely gets quite lonely out here and doesn't get to share his life stories with anyone all that often. Maybe part of why he's so descriptive when telling these stories and why he goes on and on and on for so long is so that he can create imagery in his own head to go along with them, hoping that it will help solidify the memories in his own mind for longer out of fear that they'll fade away if he doesn't give them the care they need or express them properly. The imagery
I don't think, listen, I like this video essay, but I don't think that there's all that supernatural stuff honed down. I think it's metaphorical to display certain things, but I don't think that anything actual metaphysical occurs during the movie.
He doesn't accept that to a satisfactory degree.
I did not.
Also, he's going under the basis that Old is worthy of being the light keeper, while Young is not. And I also just don't agree with that.
Following his transgression against the spirit in the seagull, that he is a violent and unhinged person who feels entitled to the beauty he believes to be in the light. You could even put in the time loop theory and have Old be the ghost of who Young would be when he transcended, here to test the real him. Notice anything about what I'm saying here? It's an absolute incoherent mess. Sure, there are things that seem to make sense there, but there are also a lot of things that aren't clearly answered or get brought into question when taking into account other elements of the film that I didn't mention, and that's pretty much the idea here. For example, I said that Old is pretty honest with his backstory, but there's this huge inconsistency with the story he gives about what happened to his leg.
I thought you said you broke it. Right? Your leg. You must have misheard.
It's futile to try and come to any concrete conclusions about the meaning and symbolism of the film. The only theory in my eyes you can say isn't left with a bunch of holes or contradictions is that we see the film through the lens of Young, who's extremely mentally unstable, and all the insane things we see are just illusions. These two are really just flesh and blood human beings, and through isolation and falling back into old temptations, one of them completely loses his mind. Maybe Old was right about Young still being up in Canada, walking through the snow and talking to himself like a lunatic.
Probably a figment of your imagination. This rock is a figment of your imagination too.
That one can also pretty much explain it all, since all the hard-to-grasp elements can be explained away as insanity. That's a perfectly valid way to look at the movie, but when you go beyond that and start taking some of the symbolism more literally, I think you lose any chance of finding a definitive answer almost anywhere, and that's one of the main appeals for me. That scene where Old is asking all of these questions to Young is easily one of the best in the movie, because at least in that moment, Young is the audience stand-in. We just watched Old chase Young with an axe and smash the boat up, but when we get back inside and the axe goes in the table, the camera pans from one room to the other, and when that happens, we've now lost the ability to actually know where anything stands, and Old immediately calls into question the things we literally just watched.
And I knew you was mad when you smashed up that lifeboat just now and chasing me with an axe trying to do Tom.
Is he messing with Young? Is he telling the truth? We just don't know, and he may as well be talking directly to us here, as he basically says we have no idea what's happening and we shouldn't even bother trying. The ending of the movie is the most clear to me, where after killing Old, Young climbs to the top of the tower covered in blood and dirt and out of his mind, clearly representative of how poorly he managed his way up here, and he finally gets to face the light that he so coveted since his arrival. But when he does, his reaction is that of sheer terror. He's utterly incapable of processing fear of what he sees in the light, as is made clear in the screenplay. The first time I saw the movie, I thought that he was laughing here, but that's not the case. Whatever he's shown in the light brings to him more terror than man is capable of feeling, and he falls back down the tower once more before awakening in this mythological image that doesn't even do us the courtesy of zooming out far enough to show the buildings on the rock, further calling into question everything we just watched. The salvation angle is the thing that's the most clear to me here, with how hard-headed and entitled Young has been the whole movie, and then being broken by terror when he's shown whatever is in there, like he's seeing the eternity he's cursed himself to by trying to force his way into the light. Old's final speech that he gives while being
See, I don't agree with that. I don't think the light is actually all that significant. I think it's the perception of the light that matters. The light itself is just a light.
Young managed to convince himself of his innocence and find a way to tell himself that he's worthy of salvation. His identity is unstable, shifting throughout the movie.
I don't think the light provides salvation. I don't think it's anything metaphysical. I think it's just a metaphor for. What is a good metaphor for? I'm not very good at articulating, but I think it's just.
Which would explain his missing eye and why the seagull only has
it's
one.
just a light, you know.
We saw earlier was because Old felt bad that his last second didn't find his salvation, or maybe we're not seeing shame here at all, but instead simply fear.
Scorching eyes with divine shames and horror, and casting them down to Davy Jones.
Both men were cast down to Davy Jones, the devil in maritime folklore, and his locker is essentially hell, which was often seen
Davy
as
Jones,
the ocean where the last second's head was
One
found.
Piece, the One Piece, the One Piece is real.
Fiddler's Green, as I said earlier, is, for the sake of discussion, heaven. So while some see the fire and their eyes are scorched out as they're shown the shame and horror of the people they are before they're thrown to Davy Jones, the ones who earned the light, while still blinded by its brilliance, find themselves in Fiddler's Green to live on for all eternity.
Beautiful and unchanging, as the she who girdles around the globe.
A girdle is a type of undergarment that wraps around the torso, so she who girdles around the globe would be the ocean itself, which Old likens to the unchanging form of those who find themselves in Fiddler's Green, the lighthouse. Good God. I feel like at some point I need to just force myself to stop and try and wrap this up, because I think I could just go on for hours and hours theorizing about what happens here, and still come to no strong conclusions, of course. Robert and Max Eggers crafted one of the most endlessly fascinating, entertaining, and batshit insane movies I have ever had the pleasure of experiencing. It's also one of the most rewatchable movies out there because of how many different breadcrumbs there are to pick up on, and I haven't even talked about all of them here. There's so many more little details in this movie, and I'm positive that there are even more I haven't picked up on yet, and maybe I never will. It's all part of the fun. As far as I'm concerned, The Lighthouse is a perfect movie. There is absolutely nothing that I would change here, and nothing that I view as a negative, which is very rare for me. The performances are also worthy.
I don't know if it's a perfect movie, but for me, it's definitely a 9 out of 10. Very good, very, very good. But it's not perfect. I don't know if that's the word I'd use to describe it.
Thanks for watching through to the end. I hope you enjoyed the video enough that you want to see more, and if that's the case, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell because YouTube can sometimes suck at recommending channels. A huge thank you to my wonderful Patreon supporters and YouTube channel members who are a massive help in allowing me to continue committing as much time as I can to making these videos. If you want to gain access to things like behind-the-scenes material or gain early access to my videos...
Alright, that was actually a pretty good video, I'd say. I don't agree with some of the conclusions, but I do like it. I did like it. I want to go back to the more theory. I just could not with that. The Lies of the Lighthouse. I fucking love this video essay.
I just had a really weird experience with a video game. At this point, you all know I kind of have a sweet tooth for cosmic horror. I consume a lot of it. But this felt different to me. It was like a whole new kind of existential crisis. The game is called Look Outside. Maybe you've heard of it. It's gotten pretty popular pretty fast. At first, it doesn't seem particularly subversive. In the game, an enormous being from beyond the stars casts its shadow over Earth. Nobody knows what it is or where it came from. They call it the Visitor. The game is called Look Outside because that's what's causing the apocalypse. Anyone who looks outside and sees the barest hint of this entity in the sky goes mad. Actually, it's much worse than that. When you look at this thing, your entire being changes, body twisted into a new, tiny eldritch horror. Before long, the world is filled with abominations who all look outside. Needless to say, the game is overflowing with body horror. It's a scary premise, but honestly, pretty standard stuff overall if you know your cosmic horror. Eldritch beings too terrible to witness sort of come with the territory. What really gets to me about Look Inside, what makes this game stick in my head, is the ending. This game does something that I don't think I've ever seen before. It gives you a glimpse of what all of this must look like from the Eldritch Horror's point of view. If you play your cards right, you actually get to speak to the Visitor. You make it look at itself from a human's perspective, all the damage it's caused, and it's shocked by what it sees. The Visitor never meant to hurt anyone. It didn't even realize it was hurting people at all. It's been destroying humanity just by observing them. Maybe it's a little weird to say, but I think that sounds sort of relatable, right? Especially for humans. I mean, you must experience this all the time. Think about how often you crush a spider, baited mice with deadly traps, magnified ants into tiny burn marks on the sidewalk. Maybe you didn't even do these things out of cruelty. Maybe it was just for fun, convenience, pure human curiosity. How does it feel to impact the universe just by looking at it? To suddenly realize how much cosmic power you actually possess? As scary as it may be to confront an eldritch god thing, I bet it's equally shocking to realize that you are the eldritch god thing. traditional cosmic horror, the Eldritch
Time
beings are
is
typically
it.
completely indifferent to the consequences of their actions. H.P. Lovecraft's Azathoth is described as a blind, idiot god who sits at the center of chaos and can't even comprehend his own thoughts. Cthulhu, arguably the Mickey Mouse of cosmic horror, is famously referred to as beyond good and evil. These beings
where does it say the
incomprehensibly
time?
powerful that they can't even recognize the destruction they leave in their wake. It's impossible for them to perceive, maybe even impossible for them to imagine, the significance of the lives that they impact. And if that's the case, then technically that kind of eldritch horror would be about as malevolent toward humanity as you are toward a speck of dust. In the 1973 film Fantastic Planet, this is how the Drogs, a colossal alien race, see humans, whom they call Oms. The Drogs have remarkably advanced technology. They live for centuries. They can astrally project through mysterious meditation rituals. To the puny, naked beings they brought over from Earth, they may as well be gods. At best, the Drogs treat Oms as pets. At worst, pests. The question of Oms' intellect, what they're experiencing, how all these indignities and exploitations might affect them, never even seems to cross the Drogs' mind. To them, it's all just entertainment, convenience, curiosity. But one day, they start to get anxious. They find that wild Oms are building their own tiny civilizations in secret. And worse, they're staging rebellions across the planet. The Drogs are quick to respond. They carry out extermination campaigns against these wild populations. As tensions rise, they even vow to de-Om their planet entirely. But somehow, the Oms always manage to survive. Despite their relatively short lifespans, they reproduce and learn much faster than the Drogs do. In an alarmingly small amount of time, the Oms manage to find a weakness within their former masters that brings the species to their knees. They've figured out how to keep the Drogs from reproducing. The Drogs, of course, have no choice but to surrender. They halt their de-Omming campaigns, they free the tame Oms and recognize them as equals. Realizing that they have nothing to gain from mutual destruction, the two species eventually make peace. Fantastic Planet is a weird movie, but the thing I find genuinely unsettling about it is the emotional detachment of the Drogs. They don't see themselves as monsters at all. They have to be forced to see the cruelty of their own actions, and even then they resist for as long as they can. If I had to guess why, I wouldn't pin it down to a simple matter of perspective. I think it's more because recognizing the Omsentience would mean that the Drogs have to confront the truth. That all this time, they've been committing atrocities against an entire race of people. They have to see themselves for the cosmic horrors that they are, which is what I think they're really afraid of. The graphic novel Beautiful Darkness by Kara Stoic and Fabian Billman is very accurately named. I've seen it described as Thumbelina meets Lord of the Flies, which really is not an exaggeration. It's full of whimsical, childlike watercolor illustrations that depict horrific scenes of violence and murder. It's a deeply unconventional stylistic choice, but in the most sickening way possible, it works. The book follows a group of tiny, pixie-like people who live inside the corpse of a young girl. No, you didn't mishear me. Just wait, it gets worse. The body starts to decompose, forcing the characters to brave the surrounding forest. Everything out there is a threat for them, from poisonous mushrooms to mud puddles to most innocent-looking woodland creatures. But the greatest danger they face, by far, is each other. As you can imagine, most of them don't last very long. One of them climbs into a bird's nest and opens her mouth wide, hoping to be fed by the mother bird. This does work, but the bird's beak is too big, and it tears her throat open. Another character solves the hunger issue by eating her own friend. Zelly, the queen bee of the group, buries a girl alive in a pencil case just because she finds her ugly. When the case is later dug back up for yet another burial, Zelly decides that it's still in great condition, aside from a few scratches on the inside. The main character, Aurora, is the only one who seems to be impacted by any of this. Once a cheerful and optimistic leader, she's gradually worn down. One by one, everyone leaves her for Zelly, even her fiancé. Her few remaining friends are murdered. Not even the forest animals are as friendly or as helpful as she expected. They behave like animals. With every death and betrayal, Aurora becomes less of a fairy tale princess and more of a cynical, cutthroat survivalist, just like the others. Isolated from the rest, Aurora ends up hiding out in a human cottage. By the time Zelly and what remains of her entourage find her, Aurora's compassion has run dry. As revenge for their brutality, she tricks her former friends into entering the oven. Once they're all inside, Aurora locks the door and relaxes as the homeowner unknowingly lights it. I've heard people say that this book physically sickened them. It's easy to see why. Of course, there's a weird mix of cute visuals and graphic body horror, which is jarring, but I don't think that's quite it. What really makes this comic haunting, I think, is how it presents death is unremarkable. Characters meet uniquely gruesome ends on like every other page, and nobody seems to mind. Life goes on. Nature is apathetic and hostile, even the mice and insects. And even if you're human-sized, the comic seems to suggest you're not above this. We constantly see the dead girl's body in the background. It's laying there rotting from the very first page, but the girl herself is barely acknowledged. The comic never quite tells us who she is, or even how she died. It doesn't matter. In Beautiful Darkness, cosmic significance is a matter of perspective. No matter how imposing humans may seem to the tiny people, they aren't gods. Their bodies still decay, they're just as vulnerable to the elements. The main characters are minuscule by comparison, both in size and importance. Their world consists of survival, betrayal, alliances, politics, and can easily be destroyed by a frog, or a bird, or an anthill. However important they may find their conflicts and struggles, the universe ultimately deems them insignificant. There's a review of the comic on the YouTube channel Ghost Hoarder that I really like and that I think puts all of this really well. In their words, you have no idea how many insects you've killed. If one of those insects was a person, you'd never know it. After all of these existentially terrifying stories, all the body horror and darkness, it might seem a little weird to bring up Horton Hears a Who, but hear me out. If anything, I don't think I can talk about how terrifying it is to be the cosmic horror without bringing this one up. You probably know the story. Horton the elephant finds a clover with a speck on it. That speck is actually an entire planet inhabited by tiny people called Who's. The other jungle animals do not take this information well. Not only do they refuse to believe that the Who's exist, they want to break Horton for believing in and defending them. As Horton tries to get the Who's to safety, he endures genuinely unreasonable levels of humiliation and exhaustion. An eagle swoops down and steals the clover and then drops it into miles of identical flowers. By the time Horton finds it, he is, quote, more dead than alive. Almost immediately afterward, a family of monkeys drag him into a cage. They intend to boil the clover and force him to watch.
This way I'm breaking
All the
two.
Who's can do to prove their existence to these unfathomably enormous
Okay,
cosmic
I'm gonna
beasts.
combine these
is explain.
two. I'm gonna
Every single one of them
combine
makes as
these
much noise as they
two.
can. They yell at the top of their lungs and blast noise from their Susian contraptions. Their entire world desperately insists, we are here. And, miraculously, it works. The animals are able to hear them, and the story ends happily.
13.
Like the Drogs from Fantastic Planet and the Visitor from Look Outside, at the beginning of the story, Horton suddenly becomes aware of his own cosmic scale. He recognizes the enormous power that he suddenly holds over an entire world. He didn't ask for it. It's just something he receives the second he
27.
finds the clover. To the Who's, he may as well be an eldritch beast, a god even. And that's a scary experience for him. He suffers for the sake of their well-being. The whole story, he's under a lot of pressure. The fate of an entire world is in his hands. Or trunk. He decides to help the Who's because he's the only one who can hear them, and therefore the only one who can save them. Unlike the Drogs, who fight tooth and nail until they have no choice, Horton accepts his new role. He understands that with his cosmic power comes cosmic responsibility. Look Outside
Okay,
actually has
buddy.
a lot of endings. Most of them are pretty bleak. Nearly all of them end with the complete destruction of the world. You don't always get to talk to the Visitor. But if you do, you're offered two choices. You can either look at the Visitor in all of its incomprehensible cosmic vastness, or you can choose not to. If you do look, you see that its enormous multicolored eye is only a small part of its body. Its true form is large enough to dwarf entire solar systems. Your sanity begins to crack as you take in the planets, stars, galaxy that the Visitor expands across, and completely fractures before you're even able to see all of it. Witnessing the Visitor's true form destroys your mind, just as it destroyed everyone else's. You become a mindless, godlike cosmic being yourself and wipe out the entire world. That's it. Game over. If you choose not to look, the game ends very differently. Until that moment, it hasn't even occurred to the Visitor that its full form will be too much for human eyes. It hasn't thought what its mere presence could mean for all these small life forms gazing up at it. But now, it understands. In a moment of shocking empathy after all the horrors you've experienced throughout the game, it leaves. It just chooses to go away. It never meant to hurt anyone. As before, you survive the experience. And, as before, you are transformed by it. Your body becomes unfathomably large, you grow tentacles and eyes and become something far beyond human. But this time, you manage to hold on to your mind. You can think about your new form and what it means. You are now infinitely more powerful than anything on Earth, perhaps anything in the solar system, and so view yourself as infinitely more responsible. You take on your new role as something of a benevolent god. You try to fix the damage done by the Visitor. You help restore the Earth and become a friend to all humanity. You embrace them, and they embrace you in return. It's a surprisingly touching ending for such a dark, bloody game. And I think that's because it's the one you get to choose. The truth is that, in real life, you don't need to transform into an eldritch beast to have cosmic significance. You already have it. Just being here, being alive, comes with enormous responsibility. To all the spiders you smashed, all the mice you've trapped, all the ants you fried, you might as well be that unknowable horror. And that's a scary thing to confront. Most of the characters in Beautiful Darkness are blissfully unaware of how much harm they're causing, and they never find out. A man goes to make himself dinner and burns a whole group of people to death. The Drogs in Fantastic Planet actively want to deny their impact, until they're forced, miserably, to confront it. Horton recognizes it immediately and is able to save an entire world. Your choices impact the world, and you won't always get to see how. Everything you do, whether you like it or not, will have consequences. I can't tell you what's right and what's wrong. I can't tell you that you shouldn't step on spiders or trap mice or fry ants. Maybe it doesn't matter. I think the real question is, are you thinking about it? Have you chosen? Have you tried to see the effect you have on the tiny cosmoses beneath your gaze? Or are you just another blind, indifferent, cosmic horror? I say that as if it's easy not to be one. Even the Visitor needed someone to intervene to show it, this unfathomably powerful cosmic being, how to see the tiny cosmos beneath its gaze. The truth is that you can't see the majority of the world you live in. It's not perceptible. It's a world you need tools and education even to know about. So I guess the first step to discovering all these microcosms is to do some learning. You can't know what you don't know until you know that you don't know it, after all. I know it's hard in this fast-paced, terminally distracted modern world, but I can at least show you what I've been doing to pick up a new education on the side. Every day, for just a few minutes a day, I've been working through little courses like this one. It's called Scientific Thinking, and it sort of teaches you the nuts and bolts of how the world logically works. I've started out guessing which way some gears would turn. Now I'm pathing digital circuits. I barely noticed all the progress I was making until, well, right now, actually. It hasn't felt like study. It felt a lot more like playing little minigames in the middle of my workday. Okay, if you didn't know it already, this is a sponsor plug, but I wouldn't be sharing it with you.
Sponsored!
This is brilliant. You've probably heard of it before. You probably already get the gist. It's an app that makes learning easy, whatever. I'm not really interested in the talking points here. What I am interested in is the fact that getting an education is hard, and Brilliant is incredibly accessible. It's cheap, easy to use, and teaches exactly the level and pace you need. You'll never be stuck in some boring lesson that's trying to teach you something you already know, and you'll never have to feel totally out of your depth. It's just really, really easy and really fun to use. To give it a try, visit brilliant.org/HailFoundry or scan the QR code on screen. There's really zero risk because with our link, you'll get your first 30 days of Brilliant totally free. Even if it turns out not to be for you, you can just cancel, never spend a dime, and walk away with everything you've learned. A whole month of education, totally free. And if you want to keep going once you get started, that same link will net you 20% off your subscription. Again, that's brilliant.org/TaleFoundry for the first 30 days free and 20% off your subscription. Scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description to get started. If you do want to get in touch with the world around you, even just start finding out about all the stuff you don't know, Brilliant is maybe the easiest way to begin.
Alright.
Anyway, that's all for this one. Thanks for watching and keep making stuff.
Alright.
I'll see you next week. Bye.
Yeah.